along with within the study area, countywide, you're going to grow to almost another 20,000 homes. That's 45,000 new residents in the next 10 years. On the non-residential side, within the study area, over the next 10 years, we're projecting an increase of 6,000 new jobs, and that's about 2.6 million square feet of non-residential floor area. So a bit more on impact fees. Generally, impact fees are one-time payments by new development. These payments can only be used for capital facility improvements and expansions. They cannot be used on the maintenance side, the operation side, or replacement. These fees are not on existing residents or businesses. This is just a one-time fee on new development coming in. Generally, this is paid at a building permit when they issue the building permit. Really, an impact fee can be summed up as a contractual agreement between the county and new development, that with that money that they're collecting in fee revenue, the county is going to be supplying new capital facilities to continue serving the levels of service. The impact fee study requires 3 requirements to be met. We need to show need, which we've done there in the projections. We need to show benefit. So the money that's being collected is going to stay within the service area, so the new growth will reap a benefit from the fee. And it has to be proportional. So you'll see within the fee schedule, there's a couple of residential land use types and several non-residential land use types, because each one of those have different demand factors, which create a proportional fee. Next slide. In South Carolina, there's a couple of intricacies. The money has to be spent within 3 years of the scheduled date of construction of a project in the capital improvement plan. So you have say a park scheduled in 2022. Money that's collected to help build that park has to be spent within 3 years of that 2022 date. This allows that sort of benefit in an impact fee, where you're not sort of, summing up money for 10, 15, 20 years, and those that pay the fee aren't receiving a benefit. South Carolina, you have to publish an annual monitoring report. There has to be a comprehensive review and update every 5 years. That requires a study like this, where we address all the levels of service, all the costs that go into this in your future capital plans. You are able to do an annual increase adjusted for inflation that doesn't require a study. And also in South Carolina, you have to perform a affordable housing analysis, and we'll go through that at the very end. But that looks at sort of the current cost today for a homeowner, and then what would the extra burden be with this impact fee. Next slide. So in this impact fee study, we're addressing Parks and Rec, sheriff, EMS, and fire facilities. There's a number of different infrastructure categories within those departments, and we'll go through that. Again, there's a lot of numbers that are going to be presented here, and if there's any questions, better probably address it now than wait for later. So if you have any questions concerning Parks and Rec, just raise your hand. So we'll go into that. Next slide. So the analysis for Parks and Recreation facilities is taking a incremental expansion approach, where we're saying today is your levels of service. So there's a factor of 1,000 people, X acres per 1,000 people, X improvements per 1,000, X recreation centers per 1,000 people, and the fee is set to that level of service, and the county is then committing to continue to provide that level of service into the future. And we do that through a couple of calculations.
I have one question while you're at it. Right now we have a certain level of service. If we think that that's maybe under what it could be, does this give room to go above what it currently is, or is it really just to maintain the level?
Just to maintain the current level of service. There's another approach, the plan-based approach, which would say, okay, we are committing X X amount of dollars over the next 5 years to bring up that level of service, and we could set the impact fees to that number. Tough thing with a plan-based approach is you are committing yourself, so if growth doesn't happen as fast as you would have thought, the county would still they would have to fill the gap of what would be projected to be needed. And I don't think we've used that approach here. A lot of times those are for larger projects where you're sort of oversizing a facility for future growth. Again, this fee is only collected and spent within that greater Panhandle service area. With this analysis, we're looking at your county-wide level of service. So what are you providing to every resident within the county? However, we are only collecting and providing new facilities with those revenues in the service area. So in this case, the committee does need to the county needs to commit to providing today's levels of service to other parts of the county without impact fee revenue. So there's a dollar amount there that we'll address in a moment here. Next slide. So this is, it's hard to even for me to see, but this is an inventory of all your parks today, the acres, the improvements, and costs to replace those. And we work with the Parks and Rec Department to gather that up. And here, sort of summing up the acres and park improvements and what it would cost to replace those improvements. You get a level of service. You divide those numbers, so the total acres of say 239 acres and 52 park improvements by your countywide population of 103,000 residents to get the levels of service. So that's in the first green line there. So today you're providing 2.3 acres per thousand and 0.5 park improvements per thousand. We multiply that level of service by the cost per acre, which we've gathered here about $30,000, and cost per park improvement, which on average is $192,000. So just for this component here, the capital cost per person is $69 per person and $96 per park improvement. Here's the countywide level of service analysis for your recreation centers. You have 4 centers today with about 60,000 square feet. To replace that, it would be about $17 million. The level of service is calculated by dividing that 60,000 square feet by your current residents, which gets you 590 square feet per thousand persons. Multiplying that by the capital cost current capital cost to replace these rec centers, you get $165 per person.
One question it's obviously not on here because it hasn't been built yet, but I guess you're familiar with the soccer complex that in the northern part of the Panhandle that's going to be I guess it's a recreation center, but this one was scheduled to be paid for with the what is it called? The tourism tax. This is what is the hospitality fee, and those can only be spent on tourism, and I believe that one was going to be paid with that too. Is that going to be paid for with development agreements? Oh, okay.
And sort of on that route, we have included a credit in some cases in this analysis to make sure that there's not a double payment scenario. So, for example, there's the 1 cent sales tax, and there's a couple of projects, Parks and Rec projects and EMS, I believe EMS projects that are scheduled to be paid from that 1 cent sales tax to ensure that new resident who may pay the impact fee but also buy things in the county, which some of that revenue will go to the same facilities that they pay for, you'll see a credit, a reduction in the impact fee for that reason. Yep. Next slide. So what we need to do is to understand, based on your current levels of service within the study area and your projected growth, how much new park acres, new park improvements, and rec centers that you're going to need in the area. Over 10 years, that's about 93 new park acres, 20 park improvements, or 24,000 square feet for rec centers. So that is about $13 million of new facilities and cost to the county. Next slide. Now, what I was sort of alluding to earlier is that because you're committing to the levels of service today county-wide, you need to continue providing that county-wide. So there's the southern part of the county, you can't over the years not keep up with that level of service, but you can't fund those improvements with impact fees because you're not collecting impact fees in the south, we're only in the panhandle area. So there's a need based on the projected growth, much smaller development happening down there. So that's only 11 new acres for parks, 3 new park improvements, and about 3,000 square feet for rec centers. So that's about $1.7 million over 10 years that the county would need to provide to continue their levels of service. Next slide. Yes. Mm-hmm. Sorry. Which parks? Yeah, well, current parks can be improved. So that would be within, sort of the greater Panhandle area can be improved. But really, especially because there's a need for 90-some new park acres, we are looking, you would need to build new parks or expand, beyond the borders of existing parks as well. Yep. It'd be any of the parks that are being used by residents of the greater Panhandle. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. Not off the top of my head. I mean, there's the soccer complex, the planned soccer complex in the north. We also there's a potential regional park off of 521 that would be providing new benefit to future residents.
Yeah, the large one on 521 that's being developed with the new neighborhood, that was the one that was going to be from the hospitality tax. Yeah, the one attached to Roseland was going to be the one that was.
There's some discussion about it. I don't know if they're actually.
So they could.
Actually say.
Right. So that could be used instead for this.
If you'll permit me, I can answer that. So there has been discussion about using the hospitality tax to pay for the regional park located at the Roseland development. Council has not made any commitment of using that funding for that park. We have a very rough preliminary design of it that was used to do a cost estimate, but we haven't included that in the impact fee analysis at this point. So this is parks excluding that regional park is what you're looking at.
And that's an example of, if we wanted to take a plan-based approach and the county wanted to commit to building that large regional facility in the next 5 years, and that would elevate the levels of service we could. Now, if that was the case, you're probably collecting a much higher fee than what we're proposing here.
Yeah, that's fine. I definitely wasn't going that route. I was more just going, okay, if that one's being paid for with X funds, then this is instead not covering that one.
Yes, yeah, and there, you'll see what we project in revenue with our Maximus Portable, the results of this analysis. Doesn't cover that full amount for that large facility, but that large facility is also providing benefit to existing residents as well. So it wouldn't be expected that the impact fees would pay for all that, for that huge facility. Yeah. Another credit that we include along with the sales tax is credit for existing debt. A lot of numbers here, so and this is straight from the 2018 referendum bond. construct some countywide park facilities. Again, this is an example where we don't want a new resident to pay an impact fee in other sorts of fees or taxes that go to the same projects. So this is the future payment schedule of that debt. We divide it out for rec centers and other purposes, and then the residential share of that payment. Then we divide that by the projected countywide population to get a credit per person, and that credit's $28, and you'll see that show up in the fee schedule. Next slide. Here's the analysis for the future 1 cent sales tax. So of that referendum, $1.6 million were for parks and recreation facilities. That's over 7 years. So the annual revenue of that 1 cent sales tax is $235,000 towards these projects. About 78% is for residential, from residential activities, and that's $183,000. We look at your countywide population to get average annual tax revenue per capita of $1.78. So over the next 7 years, that's a $12 credit per person. So here's the maximum supportable impact fee schedule. You can see the different fee components, so parkland, park improvements, and rec centers. You get that gross total of $330 per person. Reducing that by the 2 credits we've included here, that brings us to $290 per person. Now there's 3 housing types that we're including in the study: single-family detached, attached, and multifamily. And you can see that the persons per housing unit decreases with each one of those types, and that represents their demand on Parks and Rec facilities. So you multiply the persons per housing unit by the cost per person to get the maximum supportable fee. So that's $731 for a single-family home, down to $519 for multifamily home. Lastly, this is the projected revenue from that impact fee, that maximum supportable impact fee. A lot going on this slide again, but over the next 10 years in projected housing growth, we estimate a projected revenue of $11.8 million on the top in the red box there. Over that same time period, 10 years, there's going to be about $15 million in capital costs to continue providing your levels of service. So there's a funding gap of $3.2 million that can't come from impact fees. A lot of that is from the credits that we include. That's naturally going to happen when you start reducing that maximum supportable fee amount. But also the $1.7 million that the county needs to commit to providing facilities in the South. I know that there is a second soccer complex sort of underway right now in the design process for the South. It's actually over the 1.7, so sort of today you're already sort of committing to providing that level of service in the future. And also, like I said too, that 521 regional park is projected right now today's cost of $28 million. So you'll be able to cover almost half of that, but about 30-40% of that through these impact fees. Before we leave Parks and Rec, just want to see if there are any other questions. So for the sheriff, we're just looking at sheriff facilities here. Next slide. Same methodology where we're looking at your current levels of service today, projecting that into the future. Now with the public safety analysis, so for sheriff, fire, and EMS, we were able to take a little deeper dive of truly understanding what the demand is from the service area by using calls for service. And we're sort of able to proportion out of the sheriff facilities what is truly going to the greater Panhandle area. Again, this fee is collected and spent within the service area. Next slide. So looking at the calls for service of last year, about 31% of those calls went into the greater Panhandle, 46 to District 2, which is sort of the central area, and District 3 in the southern area. So you'll see that 31% show up in this analysis, proportioning out the service area's demand on sheriff facilities. Thank you. So right now, today, the sheriff station is about 33,000 square feet. We're saying 31% of that is for the demand in the greater panhandle, so that's about 10,000 square feet. To replace that, it would be $3.2 million. Now, residential and non-residential development, they have demands on public safety facilities, so we're portioning that out, 78% to residential, 22% to non-residential. So we're using those factors to separate out the attributed floor area. Then we look at your current population in the service area and current vehicle trips in the service area. So you get a level of service in the first green line of 161 square feet per 1,000 people and 35 square feet per non-residential vehicle trip. And the reason why we're using vehicle trips here for non-residential demand, it helps portion out. In some cases, when the data is provided, we're able to say, truly it's 30% of calls are retail, 20% is office, 10% is industrial. When that data is not available, vehicle trips help proportion out that demand because retail has the highest vehicle trip rate and also has the highest demand on public safety. And then you could proportionally go down with office and industrial. So that level of service is then multiplied by the cost to replace that sheriff station, which is $312 per square foot. So you get a capital cost of $50 per person or $11 per non-residential vehicle trip. Slide. The maximum supportable fee amount, you can see sort of on the left is the calculation here. We haven't included any credits. There's no existing debt or future revenues that would necessitate a credit. So on the right, you can see the residential and non-residential fee schedule. So you have the persons per housing unit for demand factor off of the residential types and the vehicle trip rate for the non-residential, and we include retail, office, industrial, warehousing, healthcare, and institutional, which would be education and other land uses like that. And you can see in the green then is the maximum supportable fee amount. So for a single-family home, that's $126 per unit. Retail is $158 per 1,000 square feet, down to about $10 for warehouse. And you can see that lines up with what you would expect for public safety demand. Next slide. So lastly, over the next 10 years, this is the projected revenue. So in the top red box, we have a projected revenue of $2.2 million. There's a projected need of $2.2 million. So with a little bit of rounding in the calculation, there's a slight non-impact fee funding, but that's close to zero. That's relative to zero, and that's what you like to see in an impact fee when there's no credits or other sort of exclusions. That your impact fees are offsetting all the demand for new growth.
Just a question with that, you did this a little different than the Parks and Rec, where with the Parks and Rec, you had the countywide that you had to maintain at a certain level. This doesn't take that into account. It's just proportion to the 31%.
Exactly.
The county doesn't have to fund the same level of service for the rest of it.
Exactly. Yep. And that's the big difference here, is because you're not, there are a couple of parks in the greater panhandle, but those residents are also using other county parks, and you can't, we didn't have a study to say, we know who the users are of each one of these parks, so we had to take that countywide approach. Here we can say, we know 32% is from the greater panhandle. So yeah, exactly that. Yep. Next slide. EMS, handful of other facilities here. We're looking at stations. We can include ambulances, also administration and training facilities, and there's a credit included here. Next slide. So same methodology as the sheriff, where we're taking levels of service today, but only the facilities attributed to the service area based on calls for service data. slide. So looking at the different fire districts and the EMS data, we had about 5,800 calls last year to the service area. There's about 18,000 total, so that's about 32% for the EMS facilities. Using that 32%, we apply that to all your EMS stations. So today, your total is 22,000 square feet. So we're attributing about 7,100 square feet to the greater Panhandle, and then there's a replacement cost of those facilities of $2.3 million. The same calculation is done here like we did in Sheriff, so we're portioning out residential demand and non-residential demand, then finding the the levels of service based on population and vehicle trips. So that's 113 square feet per 1,000 person and 25 square feet per vehicle trip. The current replacement cost for an EMS station is $329 per square foot. So that gets us to $37 per person and $8 per non-residential trip. Including your EMS vehicles, your ambulance, there's 16 today in your fleet. 32% of that is 5. The replacement cost of that is about $2 million. Portioning that out again, get the levels of service, multiplying that by today's cost to replace one of those units of $380,000. You get a capital cost of $31 per person or $7 per non-residential trip. Lastly here, you have your admin and training and logistics facility, which is about 7,200 square feet. 2,300 is attributed to the study area. Levels of service and current replacement costs are calculated to get $11 per person and $3 per non-residential trip. There's a couple credits here. The first one being existing debt that was used to construct the EMS headquarters. This is the same approach we did for the Parks and Rec, where we're looking at your future payments through 2025 or through the life of that bond. Then we're looking at the study area payment, proportioning that out to residential and non-residential. So you get a payment per person of $3 and $2 for the non-residential trip. In the recent 1 cent sales tax, there's $3.6 million for 2 projects, 2 new EMS stations. That's to be collected over 7 years, so that's about $500,000 every year. Looking at your current levels, your current population and current non-residential vehicle trips, we get a credit of $21 per person and $11 per vehicle trip. Here's the fee schedule for the EMS impact fee. So you can see the gross total, reducing that by the debt payment, credit for the debt payments, and credit for the 1 cent sales tax. Same demand factors we're using here that we use in the sheriff's analysis. So your maximum supportable fee for a single-family home is about $139 per unit. For retail, that's about $72 per 1,000 square feet, down to $4 for a warehouse. Here's the projected revenue. So over the next 10 years, we're projecting $2.3 million in revenue for EMS facilities. There's $3.5 million in projected capital needs in the study area. So there's a funding gap here of $1.2 million, and that's through that 1 cent sales tax. So that dedicated funding sources that are going to make up that difference. On the fire side, we're addressing fire stations, vehicles, and admin facilities. There's also a specific credit here that we'll address for Pleasant Valley. The methodologies, same. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing in the first two, because this is the same approach that we're taking. So we're looking at your levels of service today, so say square feet of a fire station, but attributing that to the greater Panhandle based on calls for service data. Next slide. For the fire analysis, we actually had even further granular data, so they were able to say by each station what was their call total to the service area. You can see that ranges from 0% for some stations to 99% for others. And we're using those factors to attribute the square footage and the fleets, your fire apparatuses. We are also not including those that are 3% or lower, just sort of these marginal stations, or not marginal stations, but stations that have sort of a marginal demand from that service area. Next slide, thank you. So looking at the fire stations that are providing service to that service area, the different call data here attributes 44,000 square feet to the greater Panhandle, or about $19 million in replacement costs for fire stations. Attributing that to residential and non-residential demand, and dividing that by your population and vehicle trips, you get a level of service of 705 square feet per 1,000 people, or 155 square feet per non-residential vehicle trip. Multiplying that by the current cost to replace a fire station, which is $432 per square foot, you get a capital cost of $305 per person, or $67 per non-residential trip. Your apparatuses are attributed based on that call demand. So that's about 24 units between, going from your engines, your tankers, squad vehicles, and ladders. There's a replacement cost there, and a total replacement of $9.1 million. Doing the same approach, attributing that to residential, non-residential demand, you get a level of service 0.38 units per 1,000 people, or 0.08 units per 1,000 non-residential vehicle trip. The average cost for a fire apparatus is $382,000. So you get a capital cost of $146 per person, or $32 per non-residential vehicle trip. Lastly, we're including the fire headquarters. So that's about 9,500 square feet. 41% of that is attributed to the greater Panhandle, so that's 3,900 square feet. Same approach, demand from residential and non-residential, getting the level of service, multiplying that by the current replacement cost of $312 per square foot, get $19 per person, or $4 per non-residential trip. So in Pleasant Valley Fire District, currently there is a annual assessment on homes and businesses there that goes towards Pleasant Valley Fire Department, their operations, but also their capital. And in this case, it's helping to retire a 2009 bond that was used to expand their facilities. So what we need to do, example, they're paying an impact fee to help improve their services, but they're also paying this assessment every year to do just that as well. So we need to reduce the credit. You can see it's about $66 per person, or $8 per non-residential trip. It's slightly, I believe, less than what their annual fee is, but a portion of that is still going to operations and other aspects that impact fees can't fund. There's the Indian Land Fire Department has a similar fee, but right now that's going strictly just to operations, so there's no need to include a credit here in the impact fee analysis. So because of that credit, we end up getting two fee schedules, one for the whole service area, excluding Pleasant Valley, and then the Pleasant Valley fee schedule, which just has that credit included. So you can see in the broader region, it's $1,184 for a single-family home, or $1,478 per 1,000 square feet for retail, down to $90 for 1,000 square feet for warehousing. And the fee in Pleasant Valley slightly less because of that credit. Next slide. So you can see sort of projected demand and revenue over the next 10 years. With this fee, we're estimating about $20 million in revenue, but also based on your levels of service today, there's going to be a need for $20.8 million in new fire station expansions and apparatuses. That's a funding gap about $800,000, and that's based on the credit that we've included here. Lastly, I'll sort of summarize this all and go into the housing affordability analysis. So here's the maximum supportable impact fee schedule broken down by Parks and Rec, Sheriff, EMS, and Fire. So you can see a total number of $2,180 for a single family home, down to $1,500 for multifamily, $1,700 for retail for 1,000 square feet, or about $100 for warehousing development. Slide. Pleasant Valley, for parks, sheriffs, and EMS, that fee is the same. There's a slight decrease for the fire impact fee. So looking at sort of what we're projecting in 10 years for impact fee revenue and growth, and comparing that to the countywide capital improvement plan. In the next 5 years, you can see there's projected projects, up to $85 million over the next 10 years based on our levels of service. There's about $40 million to continue your levels of service today. Most of that being Parks and Rec and Fire, and then your impact fee funding. Most of that money coming from Parks and Rec and Fire, totaling $36 million. So sort of hard to see, but we wanted to list adopted in sort of draft impact fees in South Carolina. So you can see at the very top, the adopted Fort Mill School District fee, Beaufort County schools, their draft maximum. So when you see a draft maximum, those are fee studies that we've completed that haven't been voted on by local council. So that's Beaufort County Schools, Horry County, Beaufort County, the Clover School District, City of Easley, Fort Mill, and then Lancaster there, and Lexington County below that. You can also see sort of the variety of impact fee funding, Parks and Rec, public safety, but also roads, libraries, schools. So lastly, for the housing affordability analysis, what we do initially is look at sort of base conditions. So we want to look at, for renters and owners, what the median income is, and to be considered affordable housing, we reduce that to 80% of the median. So today, 80% of the median income for owner-occupied homes is $5,600. Monthly costs for a homeowner, that includes mortgage, taxes, other fees that are included, utilities, gets us to about $1,600 per month. So the average cost burden right now is 28.6%. To be considered not burdensome, it has to be below 30%. So once it reaches over 30%, it's considered moderately burdensome. And you can see that's the case today for the renter occupied at 35% of their monthly costs, compared to 80% of the median income. Now, when we include this maximum affordable impact fee for homeowners, that increases the cost burden by 0.2%, so 28.8%, and by 0.1% for renters. This is approximately about a $10 increase for homeowners here. I believe that's it. Just open up to questions.
EMS does, of the cost of the deal. What is the minimum amount to use in the project that you want to do?
$100,000. Yeah. And patrol cars, they're getting there, but they're somewhere in the ballpark of 40 to 60. They're increasing costs, but that's why we've included the fire app. Ladder trucks are $1.2 million, which are significant costs, and under South Carolina legislation, you can use impact fee revenue for those types of vehicles.
I think you said that earlier that this can only be used for new, not for replacement. Is that applied to fire trucks as well, things like that?
Yes, yeah. Now there's a case to be made where, especially say a ladder truck or an ambulance, where um, these big costs, you know, the fire engine, where if they can say, you know, the capacity has increased, you know, say a tanker, and we're at 10,000 gallons, and now we can do 15,000 gallons. A portion of that new vehicle could be used by impact fee dollars, but only that portion of sort of expanding capacity. If you sort of are just one vehicle is exactly the same, then you're not able to. Mm-hmm.
Understanding that the county provides the fire truck to the state. Is that correct?
On here. Also, you rotate.
So that the county provides for that and under the Van White district, will the impact fee replace that? Or will the county continue to do
The county provides apparatus. We provide one fire engine, one tanker, and then one rescue truck per station. But what we're finding, particularly in the Panhandle, a lot of these stations need multiple apparatus. And through regular general fund, it's 3 vehicles were replaced on it every 7-year cycle.
the impact fee money that goes to replacing the vehicles?
My understanding is the impact fee can supplement, it cannot supplant.
And, you know, there could be a case where, you know, off the top of my head, I don't have an example, but maybe there's a station that has 4 bays available for 4 vehicles, and right now they only have 3 vehicles, so that station was expanded for future growth. You could use new impact fee dollars to pay for that new, you know, that 4th vehicle, because that's being used to provide service to new growth. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Move on. Next item is zoning for zoning that is
me too.
I gotta get out there. I'll come around and get it down there to steps. I can hold on to their rail. Yeah. Yeah, I walk out with people.
He don't want to walk out with me. I promise you. He said, Sheila, you're not any sturdier than I am.
Oh, God.
See the for sale signs on the house, I guess you closed on it.
Around this chair.
Yeah. Yes, Lord.
You gonna live there?
Yeah.
Around that chair.
But it was for a while. He actually worked. That's why we had such a hard time. Yeah, well, he worked like.
If I can hold on to that, I can go anywhere.
Yeah. It'll be awful to you. Yeah.